Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Strategy International Podcast. This is the podcast produced for Strategy International, a global think tank and consulting firm that brings together great minds from all over the world that come together, collaborate, analyze, and research topics of global interest, such as international policy and international relations, defense and strategy, environment, the economy, and much, much more. Speaking of great minds, we have a great guest with us today. We have Dr. Achilleas Karayiannis. He is an assistant professor in sustainability and organizational behavior at Neapolis University in Paphos in Cyprus. He has a bachelor's in business administration and management with psychology from Oxford Brookes University, a master's in organizational studies from Warwick University, and a PhD titled Acting and Performing an Organizational Approach from Essex University. Many interests that interest him as well. Most research interests focus on the exchange of roles at the intersection between everyday and professional life, on the pedagogical role of sustainability and the role of sustainability in the creation of sustainable competitive advantages for organizations and businesses. Achilleas, how are you? Thank you so much for being on the program.
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a privilege, and when Marios got in touch with me to organize the podcast, I was very happy to do so. And it's always a pleasure to communicate with great people, and also to put it as plainly as possible, to communicate my interests in a way that makes sense for everyone.
Especially since the interest that you have is very selective and it's very niche. Our listeners or viewers may have noticed in the introduction we used a lot the word sustainability. You're an expert in it, and I'm thrilled to have you on the program so that we can talk, because and especially with respect to that word, sustainability. We hear it a lot these days, but very few actually understand the implications, what it means, how it is used, and the projections that we have about sustainability in the future. So I think maybe we should just start there. When we think of sustainability, when we hear that word, what should come to mind? Because in my perspective, and of course I'm no expert, I hear about sustainability and immediately my mind goes to the environment. It goes to the environment. It goes to, I have a political background, so it goes into public finances. So it's usually within that realm, but it goes way above and beyond just that, correct?
Yes, well, to be honest, I came across sustainability 5 years ago. So I think a little bit of introduction into how I got into it will explain a lot in relation to my thoughts and ideas and perspectives on sustainability. Mm-hmm. When I joined Aston University in Birmingham, England in November 2018, I was initially employed to do what I used to be doing until then, which was organizational psychology, organizational behavior, human resource management, teaching, research, and all the academic stuff. When I joined Aston, I was asked by my head of the group to take over a couple of modules, postgraduate modules on sustainability. And my reaction was, why me, in the sense that my specialty was something else and I was employed for that something else. And he said, well, you know, the person who is usually taking over these two modules has gone on leave for an undefined period of time, and we need someone to take over at least for for this semester. And again, my question was, why me? Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't see any link with what I did and sustainability. But I thought there was no link with what I did and sustainability. That was a bit of a learning curve that was to come over the 5 years that followed since I took over the modules. And he said, well, you know, you taught a module on business ethics, and there was a lecture on sustainability in that module on business ethics back in Cyprus in 2016. And I told him, well, you know, when we talk about any matter and you teach it within a lecture, it's fine. It's a niche of everything, but it's a totally different story when you have to take over 1.5 postgraduate module on that very topic. It was a deep dive, but it was the best thing that has happened to me professionally in my life since 2005.
Why is that?
When I started. Well, first of all, I inherited one of the 2 courses titled Strategic Business Sustainability. The module leader was one of the most well-known authors and writers when it comes to sustainability. Her name, Helen Borland, for those who are into the subject and might remember the name, or if you are to search about someone who has something to say about sustainability, Helen Borland is a name to go for. But that module was Helen, I inherited everything from her, but she wasn't available to guide me through the material. So I had about 80 to 90 slides per lecture for 10 weeks to go through. We had 10 3-hour lectures, and for every lecture we had 80 to 90 slides. And I thought, it's impossible for me to teach this and make sense to people. So I had to pin it down to a manageable load of maybe around 30, 35 slides per lecture. But most importantly, I had to make it make sense for me before I communicate it to other people. Yeah. So that was one of the 2 major reasons it was a deep dive. And the other huge impact, bless him, he passed away 2 years ago, but in the other postgraduate module, I had half of it with my colleague Bimal Arora. The module was titled CSR, Sustainable Development and Public Policy. So through his knowledge on the topic and our working together on one module, there was quite a bit of a crossover between the 2 modules that helped me to get an even more holistic understanding of what sustainability is about. Go ahead, yeah. If I can put a temporary full stop in my answer here, it's more about the fact that one of the modules, the strategic sustainability one, was presenting sustainability as an option for organizations, whereas the other module, the CSR, Sustainable Development and Public Policy, was presenting sustainability as something that organizations have to do because this is what policies at a national or a regional or a European or even a global level are actually saying. And so it was a bit of wanting to do and a bit of having to do.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I love that. It's very interesting because you're faced with a challenge and automatically you have to sort of take on that load without necessarily understanding how to approach it, because it's such a huge topic when we're talking about sustainability. And obviously for those watching or listening, we're not going to get to the bottom of sustainability. We're not going to go through from A to Z on what sustainability is today. Perhaps we may have other episodes, but let's just jump into it, because when we're talking about sustainability, what exactly are we talking about? For myself and for people that normally follow this channel, because they are political buffs, they think of sustainability to what you said on the from the perspective of governance, either local, regional, international level, on how it affects policy, right? Because it's an orientation now that the political class is taking pretty much all over the world. But when we think and when we listen to the word sustainability, what does it mean? How is it about people? Is it about society? What comes to your mind when you think of sustainability?
Very, very useful question to introduce. Actually, what the next, the one big thing I would say that kind of characterizes and describes my relationship with my students in the sustainability classes, but much more the relationship with myself, because when we so if I am to keep one word that refers to my work on sustainability and my understanding of sustainability, is that sustainability is above all a relationship, and it's a relationship not with the public policies, not with the organizations. These things come after the relationship we have to establish with the way we do things in an everyday context. And what I mean with that is when we, the little everyday acts, for example, when we, I will use an example that I started using right from my first class on sustainability. I don't know how I came up with it. It wasn't anything planned in advance, but I asked my students a question with regard to when they go to the supermarket and they want to buy bananas, for example, and they have the choice of a single banana, they have the choice of a bunch of bananas, and they have the choice of a bunch of bananas in a plastic bag. And when they are faced with the choice of which of the three to go for, there are always decisions that relate first to them before they relate to anyone else. So if we take sustainability, I mean, an old famous model to help us start thinking on sustainability, which is also a very simple model, the triple bottom line approach, which refers to the elements that you referred to before. It refers to people, it refers to the planet, and it refers to profits. So it tries to take into consideration all of these three elements in a balanced manner. So when we try to understand the decision with regard to which of the choices in terms of bananas to go for, the purely economical decision, especially when we take into consideration economies of scale, says that it's better to go for the bunch of bananas because we buy every unit at a reduced price in relation to a single banana, for example. But if we take it from, let's say, the personal behavioral perspective, we have to take into consideration that for the economical decision to make sense and buy the bunch of bananas, it means that we also know how to use the resources of that product we actually buy. So one, it means that we have to consume all of the bananas instead of throwing one or two away, because if we throw one, the economical decision goes into the bin. The economic advantages of buying a bunch goes into the bin. But even more, what do we do with the cover of any product? Even more of bananas, where we use the word biodegradable to imply that the cover of the bananas, the peel of the bananas, can go back into the planet and become a resource to use again. So for me, the whole point was we get from the planet, but much like in every healthy relationship between humans, between everything that goes on around us, we have to return at the same time. For me, in ways, if we consume, if we borrow, if we get, if we buy, we also have to find ways to return to the planet. And in that example, when I was young, I was watching my grandmother throwing the peel of the orange into the garden, and I thought she was littering the garden. But she was actually doing the opposite. She was giving back into the relationship.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's interesting. It's interesting what you're saying, and I don't want to jump ahead because you sent me a very interesting presentation that you made recently. But in that small example that you gave, there's so much to take away from it. There's this social and also psychological relationship between what I want for me and what I want for the collectivity, whether it's a business, whether it's an organization, whether we're in politics and we're thinking about public welfare, whatever that may be. How does that cycle and that responsible reflex of me versus everything else around me work? How do you manage to grow into this sustainable kind of ecosystem and thinking exactly through the example that you just indicated? How do we how do organizations or corporations or even government in drafting its policy balance that out, everyone's personal kind of responsibility in that relationship between what I need to do for myself versus how can I contribute to the betterment of the ecosystem that I'm in?
Well, I think in order to manage that, and it's also one of the things that I'm currently looking for research-wise, the pedagogical element of sustainability in relation to the this intersection that you also introduced me with, not only in relation to the roles we play, but the intersection between the personal aspect of sustainability, as you said, in the more people's aspect of sustainability, how we keep it personal, but how we also use it to relate to other people, not only to ourselves. And I think the most important element to consider here is that when we give in general, we don't have to present it, because from the moment we start presenting it to externalities, it becomes a bit more like when you question, for example, the corporate social responsibility actions of an organization. We don't need to name an example in particular, but when organizations talk about their corporate social responsibility actions, that's for me a contradiction in terms, because if you are doing something for the good of an externality, you don't have to communicate it, because if you are a profit-making institution and you are communicating it one way or another, people cannot help but thinking that you are doing it to indirectly get something in return.
Right.
Because you are going to create a more favorable image, and obviously businesses that engage in socially responsible actions, they are communicating themselves to the society. So the society is going to come back to the business and in a way say thank you for being socially responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the very pure sense of sustainability to start with, before we engage with corporate social responsibility, for me, it's what we do without needing to communicate it to other people apart from ourselves. And for example, when I was at the university in England, I was in one of the areas in Birmingham I used to live. I had the option of taking the tram, going on foot, or taking the bus. And I was going on foot so as not to use public services, so that my personal carbon footprint would be less during the day than otherwise. But essentially, it was also an economical reason. I think the first point of our personal contact with sustainability is to strip it of all the advantages it has to offer and do it for the sake of giving, not of giving in order to get. So my decision to go on foot to the university is purely for the sake of giving to the environment instead of taking advantage of the fact that I don't have to pay for a public service, even though unavoidably this will come, but it should come secondary or third or fourth in our decision making.
It's interesting, and it opens up a door that I want to explore, because when we're thinking of organizations or businesses like you just described in their approach to becoming sustainable, and I agree with you 100%. You can't do it with the attitude of let's do this and it'll be great advertisement for our company. You have to do it almost selflessly, and then knowing that by doing so, the return will be beneficial. But in order to do that, there has to be this alignment of values. You can't just look, and this is where I want to pick your brain a little bit in terms of strategy. How do companies or how do organizations decide on becoming sustainability, and what avenue do they take in order to avoid everything that you just said and to make it real, a real action plan? And I'm thinking that the only option is that you cannot do it if you don't believe in it, and there has to be some sort of alignment in the values, in that give and take that you just described.
Yes, that's why it's more of a relationship. It's a relationship based on the values that you are reflecting on. And what you have just said reminded me of a couple of weeks before everything was suspended on campus due to COVID in February 2020. I had a class on sustainability, and I found it was around the 10th of February 2020. And I found this very interesting article on circular economy by amazing colleagues. I can't communicate the article to you at the end of the podcast, but it was touching. It was released on the 5th of February, maybe a week about before I introduced the article to the class. And it was about 6 or 7 academics, and they were introducing the concept of circular economy. And circular economy is one of the prestigious models, frameworks that relate to sustainability over the last few years. And the most fascinating thing about their article was that they agreed that they couldn't agree on a general definition of what circular economy is. And they were presenting a number of different examples in relation to what circular economy could mean for company A, but not necessarily for company B. So what I'm keeping from that article and how it might answer your question is that we have to find ways to fit it within our own context, any concept on sustainability. Circular economy basically implies let's keep the resource alive in the production cycle for as long as possible. So if you are if you have material from a smartphone and the smartphone is no longer usable, what can you get from the smartphone to give it life in another product, in another context? So for me, it's I would go with what I said before about the triple bottom line, the values for a profit-making institution. Of course, you have to make profit, but you have to make profit in a way that kind of balances the other two elements in the framework, the planet and the people. So I think for me, it's more about finding a way to balance the three elements and make it part of your strategic orientation, both in the short term, in the way you do things in an everyday context, but also in the long run in ways that defines you as an organization. So I would generally say that it's more about digging inside the organization before you dig outside and into your stakeholders and other externalities. So the vagueness of sustainability gives us the opportunity to fine tune it as closely as possible to what we want as an academic institution or as an organization. You have to be flexible to make sure that you take into consideration these three elements in a way that provides a balance between the three. You cannot forget that you are a business and every action is about making profit. It's how you would make the profit in the short term and in the long term. And what I get a sense from businesses here in Cyprus, I have been in Cyprus for the last year, since April 2023, is that sustainability and any policies and what governments say about the need to implement certain actions in response to the Sustainable Development Goals as well by the United Nations, is that it's costly. It might be costly in the short term, but it has benefits to consider in the medium and the long term as well. So one other thing that businesses shouldn't do is to say it's costly, we don't do it. You do it, maybe it will cost at the beginning, but it will be ideally beneficial in the long run. It costs to make to consider the people, and it costs to consider the society, and it costs to consider the environment. But maybe it's a very myopic view to say that it's only about cost.
I wanna pick your brain a little bit, because and this goes and this can apply on an organizational level, business, corporate, even politics. How do you measure your progress? What kind of metrics exist in order to have some sort of indication, like any indicator that, you know, the measures that are being put forward in order to achieve some sort of sustainable growth is measured, and there's an indication of progress?
Well, the simplest metric, which can also be done on an individual basis, is measuring our impact on the environment, the impact our actions have on the environment, whether we are an individual or an organization. So there is a website that I have to communicate it to you later on, but it's about, if someone types measuring our individual carbon footprint, this website will come up. If someone Googles this, the website will come up, and it allows you to input your everyday actions in relation to stuff and how much your carbon footprint, essentially the impact that your actions have on the environment. Now, it's a lot easier to be done when you are a small business or when you do it as an individual. But I think if I remember in one of my first classes, I was showing a video clip, a 3-4 minute video clip from Levi's jeans, that they found a way to produce the same type of jeans with a 90% of reduction in the use of water. So essentially, they used less of environmental resources, but they still produced the same product in terms of its design and in terms of its quality. So essentially what they did was, by using less from the environment, they were also more profitable themselves, because they were using less of the resources to produce the same thing. So my first measure as an organization is how much we can still produce by using not more than what we currently use as an organization in terms of our products and services. So it might sound simple, but the simplicity sometimes might be we might think that simplicity comes after a lot of complex thinking, but essentially it is about using less to produce even more. I think
Right.
that's the best measure to come up with. And the Levi's example, that was a video clip from 2010, 2011. I still remember it like yesterday. It was saying we can still produce the same stuff by using less resources. We just found the technology to do it.
You know, when you think of the planet, like on a grander scale, the sheer amount of people that are on this planet, and when you're listening to what you're saying, and it sounds fantastic, and it makes sense that pretty much all governments, at least in the Western world, have some sort of portion in their policy that has to do with sustainability. And you're looking and you're listening to all these things, and it sounds very interesting. But then you're thinking of the counterbalance, because I mean, you're looking at either individual efforts or even, small businesses or corporate efforts, and then you're looking at the giant polluters, in China, India, in the U.S. And you're thinking, does it really matter? Does it really make a difference when the counterbalance to all these actions that we can do either individually or in a corporate setting are so enormous? Is there even the result that can come out of these things? Can they actually counterbalance what exists now that is just horrible?
Well, you've mentioned in some of my classes on sustainability, I used I don't remember how I came across it, but when it comes to countries like India and China, and if we add into India and China, Brazil, Russia, and South Africa as an abbreviation for the BRICS countries, we think that the BRICS countries are, well, not necessarily wealthy, but they are considered to be the fastest developing economies of the world based on how much they produce. And there is a second wave of countries that coming behind BRICS, yes, like Turkey, the Philippines, Indonesia, and so on. But their grouping solely depends on how much they produce, and essentially how much money they make in a short amount of time, in a relatively short amount of time. And I started, I think, right from the beginning of my teaching on sustainability. I came across a video from Michael Green titled "How to Make the World a Better Place by 2030." And the 2030 is the time when governments and the United Nations are going to meet again to discuss how well they are doing in relation to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as these have been defined in 2015 and previously in 2000 in the two previous meetings of the United Nations on the matter. And Michael Green, he came up with a tool of analyzing the economic performance of companies and the well-being of countries and the well-being of people in those countries. And he came up with a nice tool called the Social Progress Index. And he developed the argument that the Russia's and China's and India's and South Africa's and Brazil's will produce, and they will produce, and they will produce, but there will be a point when producing and essentially the benefits of producing more and more and more will start decreasing in the sense that they will be covering people in terms of their financial needs, but what happens thereafter? So happiness is not only about how much money you make, but your well-being in general. And he presented the argument that you can do financially, and money should be important up to a certain point. And this aligns well with another theory on motivation, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically says that we need money to survive, but money is not the only factor that brings happiness and relates to the well-being of people. And he talked about other countries as well, and he said that there are a few countries that, well, there are two countries, if I remember correctly, that present the best balance between how much money they make and the well-being of people in their societies. And you wouldn't imagine the country that actually came first in relation to this relationship between financial performance and social performance. It's a tiny country in Central America, if I'm not mistaken, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is in Central America, yes. And they also said that in terms of well-being, Norway is the best place to live, not in terms of the well-being, not in terms of its financial performance. So when it comes back to sustainability, you have to consider what makes us profitable, but I think it might be a bit odd to say, but it's when we exist as people or group of people or organizations or governments, it's not only about how much money we make, but how well the people that relate to us are because of us, our employees, our customers, our local communities, and other stakeholders in general. So, you know, money is there and we need it, but it's not the sole decision-making factor in terms of our motivation and happiness and existence in an everyday context. I'm not sure if I have diverted a lot from your question, but
No. It's great, which brings me to the following question, because you mentioned I believe it was the Paris Agreement in 2000, the UN agreement that set targets for 2030, and most of the big countries, especially in the Western world, are not even close to these targets. I'm thinking of my own country, Canada. U.S. is definitely not there. In fact, I believe when Trump was elected, he withdrew from the agreement. So when you're looking at that, when you're looking at an actual conference where you have representatives from all over the world that actually sit down, they look at the importance of sustainability, establish targets, and then, 2030 isn't far away, right? I mean, it's in 6 years. None of these countries are even remotely close to these targets. What does that say about leadership? And obviously, from a political perspective, maybe that has a huge difference than a corporate setting. But just in general, where is the leadership on these approaches on making sustainability matter?
I think the first thing that comes into my mind is that we are separating, we have created a world, if I can overgeneralize now, where part of the world consumes and part of the world produces. And we keep them far too separate. Even most of the multinationals we know, they have their markets in one place and their factories in another place. It's only when you go to the root cause of the problem, the production, how resources are used, that you get to understand why sustainability is becoming even more important. Because if I buy this pen here in Cyprus and I know it's been produced in India and I have no relationship with India, then I don't know what has gone behind it in order to produce it, from all of the aspects that relate to sustainability, how much money, how many resources, the working conditions, and so on. And for me, our products are not only what we use, but it should be a relationship not only with us using it and how we relate to our other people in our everyday context, but finding ways to understand what has led to it from a people's perspective and from a production perspective. It's easy to buy something and use it and not care for the conditions that it has been produced and the people involved in its production, because it's too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I think leadership would be more about how to bring the production and the consumption elements in as much as possible in the same context. Now, I have no clue how this would happen, but for me, a good leadership with regard to sustainability would bring the reality of sustainability, the reality of production, as close as possible to the reality of the market and to the reality of consumption at the end of the day. And I was talking to, we were discussing the concept in a class that I have here at Neapolis. It's a course. It's a module called Industrial Organizations, and it takes into consideration a number of problems and a number of actions from organizations from an economical perspective as well. And we were discussing in the class about the fact that we every next day, for the same amount of money, we can buy less. And we can buy less because things are getting more expensive, and things are getting more expensive because of the scarcity of resources. And the scarcity of resources, when you use one resource, the more you use it, the less you have to produce again. So it's a complicated circle where you consume more, but the world, in terms of its natural resources, is becoming less. And when I told them that in terms of the current state of natural resources, the planet can satisfy satisfactorily life on Earth for about 3 billion people instead of the 8 that we are. They were we grow in numbers, we use more, but there is exponential even less from the planet. So what we need to do something about the overall picture at the end of the day. However, even though in terms of the overall figures, when looking at the numbers, and in terms of the planet's current state of natural resources, the planet can satisfy life for about 3 billion people. In one of my recent lectures in Germany about a month ago online, one of the students said, yes, it's about, I have heard of the number 3 billion. I have heard of the same number from something that I have read recently. So I kind of agree with what you have said. That's what the student said. But he also said that it's not only about the 3 billion people. He said that there was another study that reflected on the fact that if we were to use the resources more wisely, the planet could satisfy life for up to 12 billion people on the planet. So about 4 times more than the amount of people, the amount of people it can satisfy at this point. So it's not only the availability or unavailability of resources, it's how we make use of the resources at a personal and organizational context.
It's a give and take, if I understand. You have a formula that can be altered. It's just that if you increase one aspect of it, you have to decrease another in order for the formula to work, basically.
Mhm, mhm.
Let's take a look at something a little bit more positive. Give us some examples of either organizations or governments or corporations that have pivoted toward a more sustainable approach and that are actually succeeding. Are there any examples that come to mind?
Well, the one example that it's a very academic example, but I think that it stuck into my mind when it was introduced at the beginning because it related to me both from my part as an employee of Aston University, but it also related to me in with regard to the modules that I was teaching. There was an initiative in 2019 at Aston University to introduce sustainability principles in all of the modules of the business school, whether they had directly to do with sustainability or not. Every course outline was to be reshuffled a little bit and introduce this element of sustainability in all of the modules within the business school. And for me, it was a very good um, um, a very good strategy in the sense that yes, maybe it doesn't. If we introduce sustainability in everything, it doesn't necessarily relate to all of the modules in the same way, but it will increase awareness and consciousness in relation to the impact of sustainability in everything that we do in an everyday context. So yes, sustainability is obviously more related in a sustainability CSR, sustainable development module, but it could also be related to marketing, for example, or could be related to public services. It could be related into the way we do recruitment and selection in an organization. So from that aspect, it was my first experience of, as far as I'm concerned, successful implementation of something that has to do with sustainability, that it's not only about sustainability, but generally how an institution can use sustainability to become more environmentally conscious, but still remain profitable, if that makes sense.
Right. You mentioned marketing, and I remember seeing in your presentation a case study about Patagonia, the clothing line, and how it altered toward a green marketing approach in order to continue its operations. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was Patagonia was founded on the principles of sustainability, whereas like the example I mentioned before about Levi's jeans, they kind of reshuffled the way they operate in order to find a way to behave sustainably. But Patagonia was founded on the principles that of sustainability and basically the suggestion that we can still we want to produce clothes, but through the use of resources in a way that still kind of protects the environment. So we get from the environment, but we get less in order to produce what we need. Okay, the Patagonia is a bit of, let's say there is the counter argument that with some of Patagonia's products, it's not necessarily products that are friendly to the human body in the way they are made and with the use of plastic, but that's another part of the story. The whole point is that they were founded on the idea that we can still produce by using less from the environment.
Right. We can stay on and talk forever. I know that you're a very busy man, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Do you have any closing remarks for the people that are watching or listening on sustainability, things that are maybe happening that we're not aware of that you are? Anything that you want to inform our listeners or viewers?
I think my closing remark is to find use sustainability, make it relevant to you before you make it relevant to someone else. That's my punchline.
There you have it. Achilleas, thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your knowledge with us. I want to invite everyone listening or watching to head on over to www.strategyinternational.org. You're going to see a wealth of resources over there, and you can learn a little bit more about what Strategy International does. And you have all the back catalog of all these wonderful productions that are being made over there. Achilleas, thank you so very much for your time. I hope that we can have maybe a subsequent episode where we can dive into more knowledge of sustainability.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I agree that today we talked about the matter in a bit of a generic way, but we can definitely come up with a session on sustainability that looks into a case study or an organization, dive deep into a particular context. So today, for me, the whole point was to introduce my understanding of sustainability, what it means for me, what it could possibly mean for other people and organizations. But for me, the takeaway would be for our audience to come up with their own establishment of what sustainability means for them before what it might mean for other in their relationship with other people and externalities.
There you have it, and I'll look forward to that one when we do it again. Thank you so much, Achilleas, and for everyone listening and watching, thank you so much. We'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you.